This is the 2023 Transportation Alternatives Workshop, hybrid and online. We will have presentations by the TPO and FDOT. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into our presentation.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Josie Bermudez, and I am a transportation planner from the TPO, the Miami-Dade TPO, and I will facilitate the 2023 Transportation Alternative Program this year together with FDOT. Just letting you know that this meeting is being recorded, and so there are just a few guidelines that I would like to mention before we start the meeting and make sure that everybody's on mute. We will have time where we'll take questions from the half of the session. We'll let you know. And if you have any questions or comments, before you do, please make sure you raise your hand and we will take your questions or comments. This Zoom meeting does not have any comment section or chat section, so we will need you guys to raise your hand before and we'll take your questions. Make sure you stay muted throughout the time of the presentation, and we'll go ahead and start right now. So in our agenda this morning, we'll welcome both teams, which is the TPO and the FDOT members that will be supporting this program and presenting. We'll go over the transportation alternative aspect, and then we'll have the process that we'll be discussing and the application requirements that will be discussed by the FDOT, and the program that you guys will need to use to submit those applications, and then we'll take questions. Originally, we would take questions at the end, but we'll make sure that we split it in half so it doesn't get too overwhelming. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll have our comments. So this morning we have the TPO staff with us together with FDOT. Again, I will start with myself, Jocelyn Bermudez, transportation planner at the Miami-Dade TPO. And also supporting me, I have Francesca Taylor. We have Kevin, who's online, and Chris, who's just joined us. So I will give them the opportunity so they can present themselves.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Again, Francesca Taylor, Miami-Dade TPO Program Development Manager.
Good morning, everyone. Chris Rosenberg. I'm the TPO Deputy Administrator for Transportation Reviews.
And we have Kevin online.
Kevin Walford, Transportation Planner, working with Francesca and Josie on the TA.
Thank you, team. And I will pass it over to FDOT, starting with Xiomara and whoever else is with her.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Xiomara Nunez. I'm the District 6 Local Programs Administrator for FDOT. With me, I have our local program coordinators. Vicky, go ahead.
Victoria Prieto, Local Program Coordinator for FDOT District 6.
And
Alina Brito, Contract Coordinator.
all right. Go ahead, Josie.
Thank you, team. I am very happy to have the supported team with me this morning, and we will start our presentation now. In our screen, we have the letter that has been sent from FDOT announcing the opening of the cycle for the 2023, which is a transportation alternative application cycle. Be mindful that this is a federally funded program that has been established by the U.S. Department of Transportation since 2012. And now we are all invited, the municipalities, to submit our application. And this program is administered through FDOT, the District 6 Program Management Office. And they will go ahead and receive those applications through the GAP system. And application is due by, it needs to be submitted by February 20, 2023. So basically next month you have a full month to go through the application and submit that. So for the process, we have 9 eligible project categories. I'll go over them briefly. First, we'll have the construction of on-road and on-road trail facilities for pedestrians, bicycle, and non-motorized form of transportation. We have construction planning and designing of infrastructure-related projects. That also includes safe route for non-drivers. We have the conversion and use of abandoned railroad corridors for trails, construction of turnouts, overlook and viewing areas. And we also have community improvement activities, which it could be billboard and advertisement and so forth. We also have any environmental mitigation activity, including pollution prevention and pollution abatement activities and migration. We have the Safe Route to School program eligible projects. That's infrastructure or non-infrastructure related activities, and also for Safe Route to School coordinator. Number 8 is planning, designing, or constructive boulevards and or other roadways, largely in the right-of-way of former interstate system route or other divided highways. And we also have the recreational trail program under 23 USC. We have some pictures that I posted on the side so you could have, an idea of what was submitted the last cycle. So we have bridge, we have roadway improvements. So just to give you a slight ideas of the different categories that are eligible for the program. Next slide.
Can I make a point of clarification?
Sure.
So, well, when we're talking about bridges, remember, these are transportation alternatives. So not vehicular bridges under TA, more so pedestrian bridges.
Go ahead. Thank you, Samra. So we have general criteria for the selection of the projects for this program. Be noted that no more than 1 million of TA funds will be awarded to any single project in the single application cycle. So if you have application that's cost more than 1 million, you have to demonstrate the additional funds that will be supported to complete this project. And during the cycle as well, no more than 3 applications per department can be submitted. And so if you submit more than 3 project application, also you will have to let us know which one that you guys want to prioritize, rank 1, 2, or 3. And for this application package, we need to have those different categories, which completed the application fully. We have to submit your attachments, exhibits, typical sections, the plans, and the letters of support. You also need to have the report of previous funding awards and the status of each project. And the application also needs to be submitted, or the following needs to be identified in the application, which is right-of-way needs and status, including easement, the environmental and cultural resource analysis, and of course, permitting requirements. So in the application process, once we receive those applications, we will have an evaluation criteria. Those points are divided. Miami-Dade TPO with Monroe County will have a total of 125 points that they will be working with. And DOT, which is the Florida Department of Transportation, will have a total of 25 points for the criteria. So from TPO and Monroe County evaluation criteria, these are the points we categorized them and divided them. So for project safety improvements, we have from 0 to 20 points. Intermodal transportation, it's 0 to 20 points, which also provide access to transit station. We have mobility enhancement, 0 to 15 points. And that covers enhancement for children, elderly, and those with limited transportation options. Local funding contribution, 0 to 10 points. And neighborhood or community quality of life improvements, 0 to 15 points. And community support, 0 to 15 points. So though, just note that TPO and Monroe will prioritize 25 points to the projects. And so when you submit your application, whatever is being prioritized will receive 25 points. So the second one will receive 24 points. The third one will receive 23 points. And so we'll discuss more. We'll take your questions if you guys have any questions regarding the points at the end. And right now, I'll pass it on to TPO so they can discuss their 125 points criteria. Thank you.
All right, so I'll address the DOT evaluation requirements, and we'll take questions after that. So start thinking about any questions you may have on the first half of the presentation. But from the department's perspective, we're really looking at the criteria in 4 major categories. 1, your feasibility. 2, the contribution that you're saying that you're going to be participating in the project. Your certification status and past performance, and I'll go into each of those in a second. So on project feasibility, you'll see that's the area that has the most points, it's 60 points. And we're looking at what you indicate is your scope of work. What's your plan for implementation, right? It's talking about schedule, your permits, you know, we want to know that you've thought through the elements that are going to be impacting your project, and you're considering that as you're going and building the applications. You really want to know that when it's time for these projects to be built, they're going to be constructed. So the environmental evaluation is part of it. All the projects that get awarded TA funds are federal highway funding, and with it carry the federal requirements. So NEPA is one of them. It's going to be required throughout the entire process. The right-of-way evaluation, so Uniform Relocation Act, right, becomes part of the requirements. We want to know that you're telling us if all the work is within your right-of-way, or if you need to acquire a right-of-way in some shape or form, that you've thought through that, you've started the conversations. We need to know what's going into the project and how much time those type of activities would take, right? And then the opinion of probable cost, and I'll get into that a little bit later as well. There's a cost estimate template that we're incorporating this cycle that we'll be using in this cycle and cycles moving into the future. Your past performance is the other major category, and I know I skipped over 2, and I'll go back to those in a second, but past performance is the other major category. It's 40 points. And if you're an agency that has not done work with DOT in the past, we're not penalizing you for that. So, if you haven't worked with us, we're not going to dock you 40 points. We're going to assume that you're going to bring your very best work to us, and we're giving you the 40 points, right? But for those of you that have worked with us, it's being broken down between procurement, project management of a professional services project, and project management of a construction project, and invoicing, right? So from those 4 main categories, we review previous performance and score on a 0 to 10 point system, and that impacts future awarding. So then local funding contribution is really how much participation or not you guys have in the project. We want to know that you're invested in the project as much as we'll be. So we do score based on that. And the final category is the lab certification status. This doesn't mean that if you're not lab certified, you get 0 points automatically. We're looking at whether or not you're certified and have done the homework, right? So if you haven't been certified before, I encourage you to look up Chapter 7 of the Local Programs Manual. It discusses certification in detail, and you're more than welcome to reach out to my team, and we can help you as well. We want to know that you have a plan for certification, that you understand all of what goes into it, and that you're committed to that, right? Because you will need to be lab certified to administer a federal aid project with federal highway funds. So that's one of the categories. 2, if you're project specific certified, if you're full certified, and whether or not your certification has had corrective action. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at that criteria. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, this is our point to stop for questions. So questions from anyone in the room or anyone on the Zoom?
I have a question. When it comes to the caps, it was very clearly mentioned that there's a $1 million per application cap and then no more than 3 applications per cycle per agency that's submitting. Is there a cap per project? So as an example, if there's a project that's requesting funding over multiple cycles, do they get capped at a certain value?
So the cap is per phase as well. So in the first bullet, so if you can go back to slide number 10. So it's no more than $1 million per project in a cycle and no more than $1 million per phase, so in a single project. So that would be your cap at $1 million per phase.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure, thanks for the question.
I have a question.
Sure.
Good morning, Xiomara. Good morning,
Good morning.
everybody. This is Aurelio with the City of South Miami. I understand that one of the criteria for selection is that no more than $1 million is awarded to any single project in any single application cycle, and no more than $1 million is awarded per phase to any single project, as was mentioned before. We would like to find out if we can apply. We already received $1 million for for a pedestrian crossing at US 1 for construction. Can we apply for an additional grant for that project for construction?
So as I was stating before, as long as the projects, you said you have $1 million for the construction phase, and I believe you received some funding for the CEI phase. And I don't know if it covers the full amount, but so if your CEI phase is going to cost $1 million, then you can apply for up to the difference of what you've been awarded in that phase, right? Because there's no more than $1 million awarded to any phase as well. So if you've already been awarded on a phase $1 million, then that would not be eligible.
Thank you.
Makes sense? Other questions?
All right. So if we don't have any more question at this moment, if that, we'll go through the application requirements and in depth of where to go as far as the gap system and how to go about filling out the application.
So to start, we have some key milestones for you all. As Josie mentioned earlier, the applications are due February the 20th. It is a hard deadline in gap. My strongest recommendation and urge to you all is when we get off of this call, please open gap. If you don't have gap login, create a gap login. Make sure you're able to download the application. If you have a gap login, you've done this before, still go into gap. Make sure your login works. And if it doesn't, reach out to the Black Cat support, and I'll have their information up on a slide further on in the presentation. You want to make sure that you're able to access gap now and not towards the deadline, because I've seen in the past where people have had some delays in getting access, and you don't want that to be the reason why you're not able to submit an application that you worked so hard on. The next major milestone that's going to come to applicants is the due date for the PowerPoint submittal to us. There are required presentations as part of this process, and the presentations are going to be on the 15th and 16th, tentatively the 16th. These dates are still subject to change, and we'll work with you as we get closer. But the 7th of March is the deadline for the PowerPoint submissions to us. Then, so that you all know, on our side, we go through the review, the evaluation process, and package it all together to submit recommendations to the TPO from DOT side in May to the TPO. And then the TPO will notify applicants around June and July on award. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more information on the presentations. They are in person. They're at our district office. The address is here on the slide. We will be requiring you to do a presentation. If you do not do a presentation, your project is ineligible for funding. And the format is, as it's been in the past, 5-minute presentation, 10 minutes for question and answer. I recommend that you time your presentation before the actual date. We are very strict on the time just because there's a lot of applications that we receive and we go through a lot of presentations in a day. So if we hit the 5-minute mark and you're still in your presentation, I'm sorry, but I will be forced to stop the presentation mid. And anyone that's done a presentation, can attest to me having to stop a couple. So we really want to get through all of the PowerPoints. My recommendation is make sure that you're focused on what really makes your project stand out. What's the benefit of your project? What's the scope that you're really trying to achieve? Help us understand why that project is so critical, right? You know our evaluation criteria. How can you make your project stand out the most with respect to the criteria we're evaluating on, right? So some general information, and these are kind of just based off of lessons learned too. So we do really want to see comprehensive applications, really complete, answer every question. If a question isn't applicable to you, state it's not applicable and tell us why. We want to, if you have, for example, an attachment in that relates to your application, don't give us the package. For example, let's say you have a study that relates to your project. We don't want to see the full study, but maybe a couple of pages in the study can give real insight into the project. Include the attachment, the attached sheets. You can include the cover sheet and just those 3 sheets that relate to the project, right? Want to really direct the reviewer's attention to what you think is the most important aspects of your project or application. Really important, you need to use the application template that's in GAP. We cannot accept a modified application. So make sure you're downloading the copy from GAP and using that as your submitted document. Josie mentioned this earlier, but make sure that there's funding available for the project, right? This is a reimbursement program. So you need to be able to cover the full cost of the project before we reimburse you for it, right? So we really need to see, and we'll get into that we'll get into that later on in the presentation, but we really need to see that you have support from the budget office in this cycle, and we'll talk about the next cycle in a few. But in this cycle, we need to see that your budget office has approved the project for funds and there's commitment to the project, right? For the full project amount. We do require a cost estimate as an engineer's estimate. There's a template, and I'm going to show an example further down in the presentation. And we are requiring everyone to use the template. It's one of the downloads in GAP. And then for any projects that are outside of your agency's right-of-way, we are requiring that you include some document of support in the application showing that you've coordinated and they're okay with the project, right? For example, we had an instance where there was a project that was on DOT right-of-way, and the coordination had already been happening in DOT on the same kind of scope of work, right? So we really want to have that early on coordination and communication happening at the district level before we see an application for a project on our right-of-way. But this doesn't just apply to projects on DOT right-of-way. This applies to, for example, an agency within county right-of-way. We want to see that you've been talking to the county and the county is in agreement with this project, right? We don't want to get to the point of project commitment, right? Starting the design, trying to get through design, and then you have to pull back on a project because not everybody's on the same page with their work. And as I mentioned earlier, the applications are going to be due via GAP, and the deadline on GAP is 5 p.m. on the 20th of February, and it is a hard deadline. So the application, everybody's favorite part. We've broken down the application into a couple of screenshots. I have not screenshot every single section of the application, just a few key areas. And I'm not going to go through every single item in the application, but feel free to, if you have a question on one of the items, jot down your question and we'll take it at the end. The first section is really information about the applicant. I really want to call out the fact that we need to see in this section the person that's going to be able to give us project information, right? That's going to be able to coordinate on behalf of the agency if we have additional questions. That's our go-to person, right? Because we will be collaborating the presentation with this person. If we have questions from the reviewers, we'll be funneling it through this individual. So that's who you want to identify in this application as the contact person. This section is about lab certification. And as I mentioned earlier, lab certification is one of the criteria that we evaluate on. So here we want to know if you are lab certified, when your certification happened. If you're not lab certified, but you're going to seek certification, identify that all here. If you're lab certified, well, if you're not if you're applying and you have a lab sponsoring agency, you would indicate that the individual, the sponsor, right? So sometimes we have an agency that will collaborate with a lab sponsor that's gonna do the project on behalf of the entity. And so there needs to be a lot of collaboration between those two entities, but you would be identifying the lab sponsor in this section, if that's the case for anyone in this call. All right, on this section, what's really important is that we understand where your project is. If the project is in multiple locations, then we need to know every single location where the project is, right? There's a section that you'll be able to upload additional attachments. If your project is in various locations, one of your attachments should be a list of every single one of those locations. In addition to an aerial map of showing the project locations throughout. All right, so then this next section is project description and scope of work. The key things with this section is we need to understand your project, right? My recommendation is if you're the person that writes this section, approach someone that hasn't seen it and ask them to read it, because we want to make sure that when we're reviewing the application, we understand exactly what's being built. If it's a pedestrian bridge over an intersection, we want to know, where the landings are, where the span is, what type of bridge, what is your idea for this project, right? If there's sidewalks, we want to be able to see where the need for the sidewalk is that you're proposing, right? So be as clear and detailed, right? The description section is the shorter version of the scope of work, but between the two, they should be both consistent and clear. We should know exactly what you're trying to do with this project, the application per se. Public involvement. So something that I talk about every single time we do any kind of application, not just TA. I've seen projects that get put into the work program that aren't communicated with the public, and the project doesn't survive, right? The project gets removed from the work program because the minute that there's public involvement, the public is not in support of the project, and the project has to be, terminated. And it's not terminated by us, it's terminated at the request of you all. So it's very important that at the front end, you're making sure that people are aware of what you're trying to propose in their community and that they're in support. And we want to see what extent or what meetings have occurred with your public, with your community for the project. So make sure that you're including this and incorporating this into your application. All right. This next section is talking about your environmental permitting and environmental reviews, so to speak. There's another attachment in the application later on that's environmental evaluation, if you will, and it goes through basically a type 1 checklist that our environment section would be going through as they're evaluating for certification. But in this section, really, you just want to know if your project is within wetlands, contaminated areas, and any endangered or threatened species. All of these might trigger different reviews or surveys, reports that might need to be done. For example, one thing for Miami-Dade County that's a big one is the Florida bonneted bat. Florida bonneted bat, the whole Dade County area basically falls into that consultation area, and depending on what type of work you're doing, if you're removing trees or pruning such that type of activity, you're going to trigger a bonneted bat survey, and that is additional services that you need to anticipate for your project, right? To your cost for the design and potentially even construction, right? So then in the second question here is environmental permitting. So really looking for forward thinking, right? What type of permits might your project trigger? Are you doing work in water? Is there drainage involved, right? What type of coordination is going to be necessary, and what type of what duration each of those activities tend to take, right? Make sure you're incorporating that into your schedule early on and building a comprehensive schedule so that when you're requesting funds, you're requesting it in a year that aligns with all of the work that needs to happen for the project. And I will state on that conversation of schedule, we understand this is all preliminary. In some cases, there hasn't even been a design yet. And so the extent of the detail that you're able to get in your schedule is going to vary. We're not expecting to see a full Gantt chart, but we are expecting you to, be thinking along the lines of similar projects. How long did those take, and using that as your basis for building your schedule for these projects, right? Project implementation, this section is really asking you what phase you're requesting funds for and who you're requesting to do this. Is this something that you're gonna have done by a consultant? Is this a phase you're asking DOT to take on? Is it something that you're asking to be done with agency staff, right? So this section is asking about other projects related to, and this doesn't just mean if you have a project, let's say you have a project and it's being phased out, then the different segments, you would include here the FM numbers for those segments that relate to it. If this is part of a bigger project and they all are related in a bigger study, and you want to let us know what in the work program is already related to this project so that we know and we can relate them ourselves in our system. All right. Right of way. So this is asking really if you're working within your right of way or you're proposing acquisition. Again, Uniform Relocation Act becomes important in any required acquisition. And we also are asking in this section if you're needing a temporary easement, temporary construction easement. Really, any information you have on right of way, make sure that the relevant sections are being uploaded into the additional upload section. Cost estimate for funding request. So here, you want to break this down per phase with the exception of design. I'm going to tell you how we look at this from a design perspective. The design cost, the environmental assessment, and the permits, we have it separated out to make sure you all are thinking about the costs associated with each of those. When we program, we program them all as part of the design phase. So when you're breaking down the cost of design, make sure that you're separating out what of it is part of the environmental surveys that you have to do. If there's a bonded path survey, cultural resource assessment, any of that needs to be done, that would be separated out into the environmental assessment section. And the permits, if you're anticipating getting permits, what the cost associated with that would be, and put it in that section. On our end, we would still combine those into a design phase. The other part here is making sure you're breaking down what from this is the request for TA funds and what is going to be local funds, right? In this section, the TA funds need to be consistent with all the funding sections, right? You want to make sure all the numbers add up, everything matches. The other thing too is you'll notice at the bottom of the table, there's a percentage. So Josie said earlier, we want to make sure that we have the full funds for the project, right? So the way we're gonna view this and we're gonna see this is you're asking for X number of dollars of TA funds. And you're saying that, let's say that it's 900,000 is TA and 100,000 is local funds. It's gonna tell us at the bottom, auto calculate 10% and 90%, right? And then when we're looking at scoring, we're gonna say, okay, well, this agency is committing 10% local funds to this project. So it's important because anything you're putting in local funds is how we're going to keep the project coded, if you will, moving into the future. So let's say you got a construction phase and there's 10% local funds at the time of the application. And when you have a construction bid, you receive the bids and you're requesting concurrence to award. Let's say that the project doesn't cost $1 million, it costs 900,000. We're gonna adjust the LF to 10% of the 900,000 and reduce the award amount at that time. So be cognizant of what you're saying is LF, because we are, since we're using it as a scoring criteria, we're going to be keeping that into the future.
And Simona, if I may just quickly jump on it before I forget, the converse is also true. So if there's a change order or if there's a bid that escalates, the agency is responsible for that difference beyond what is awarded.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is a great point. And that's where it's very important for you to be setting aside some contingency, right? The department doesn't participate in contingency. We would automatically populate that as local funds on our end. But you want to make sure that you're prepared to cover cost escalation, because if there is a need for a change order, as Chris said, we're not participating in any cost increase.
And Zima, I believe Maria Covelli raised her hand. You want to take the question now?
Sure, that's fine.
Maria, do you still have a question?
I did, but I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can.
hear.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure if my mic was working. Is there a required minimum match amount?
No, there is not.
Okay,
It can be 100% request, keeping in the 100%, that the 100% doesn't exceed the $1 million, right?
Right.
Max per application for phase. But no, there is no required match.
Okay, thank you.
But there is a bonus in the scoring, so to speak. So you're
Right.
scoring higher if you have.
You're scoring higher, it's part of the evaluation criteria, so if you're participating in the project, you're just gonna score higher.
Right, got that. Thank you.
Sure. Any other raised hands before I keep going?
I think that's the only one I saw for now.
All right, so this next slide is really just listing all of the attachments that you would see in GAP and download. And they're just kind of going into a little bit more detail on the application, so that you're all aware, the application, the main application template is a statewide application. So every district's general application looks like the screenshots that I've shared with you. These attachments, they're district attachments that help us understand your project better from the things that we've seen on our end and the information that we need, I guess, elaborated on or clarified, right? So all of these attachments are required attachments, and I'll show you how you see that in GAP. And they're going into each of these sections a little bit more depth. So project implementation plan is gonna ask you if you have design plans, about any permits that you have. If you have plans, you can attach plan sets. Your schedule, we're wanting to see your schedule, including procurement. So from the genesis of it all the way to the end, in as much detail as is available. Environmental evaluation is looking at your type 1 checklist, which is basically our environmental office has NEPA assignment, so they sign off on the environmental certification on all lab projects. And they do so by going through this type 1 checklist, assuming that it falls into that category, based on the impacts of the project, which most of them tend to. So going through that attachment, you should get an idea for the type of questions that our environment section would be asking during the project, right? And they're all about different impacts, relating to the project. Like I mentioned before, Miami-Dade is a big one. Cultural resources is another one that tends to come up a lot. If you have any properties that are 50 years or older within the vicinity of the project, that would trigger a cultural resource assessment. Parks within the vicinity of the project or work inside of a park triggers the 4F requirement. So those are just a few ones to keep an eye out for, and all things to be thought about when you're talking about schedule, right? And then the budget commitment letter is what I was referring, project funding attachment is, I think that one is just a breakdown of the two. Second. Project funding attachment. I think the project funding attachment is just the breakdown of what's TA funds requested versus the local funds requested and the percent amount. Because the detailed table, as you saw earlier in the application, is part of the general application. And I believe also we're asking for the year that you're requesting the projects to be funded in. So for every cycle, any application cycle, not just specific to TA, we're looking at funding in the new 5th year, right? We're receiving allocations later on or early in the next fiscal year for the new 5th year of the work program, and we're running this cycle for projects for that new 5th year, which is 2029. However, we have additional funds in earlier years. And when we do have that, depending on the project scope, depending on the complexity, depending on the readiness, we're able to program projects earlier in the work program, if everything aligns. So if you do have a project that you want to request funding earlier, you can always note that in the application, the year that you want it to be programmed, but also keep in mind that when we're looking at this, our first view is the new 5th year work program. And we would not be programming anything in the first year of our work program, which is going to be 2024, come the next cycle. The other attachments here are the project budget commitment letter, which is what I was referring to earlier. We want to know that your budget office is giving you the green light on the fund. So we need to know that the project is gonna go in the year that's committed. And if you're saying that you want a project, for example, in 26, and your budget office is committing the project to 26, but if you don't get funding in 26 for the project, you might be ready to or able to move the project to a later year, right? Let's say maybe 26 isn't available, you're okay anyway, anywhere until the year 29. State that as well, right? We need to know what your flexibility is on funding, because just because you have funds available in 26 doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have that availability in a later year. So then project sponsorship certification, this used to be our last sheet of the application. This is just saying that someone with authority in the agency is signing off to completing this project, basically. And then the right-of-way letters, what I was referring to earlier, having that support from the entity whose right-of-way you're working in the application. And the cost estimate, if we go to the next slide, looks like this. It's a lot bigger than that. It's not 3 rows. We had to shorten it so that you can actually view it. What we're really looking to see is that you do that homework on the front end on eligibility, right? Not everything that's part of a project is necessarily TA eligible. There's some guidance, some reference guidance in the cost estimate at the bottom that you can look at. This chapter 6 of the manual, the TA set aside guidelines. We want you to break out what you're requesting as part of this project and what are TA eligible items, right? And what isn't. So as an example, let's say you're doing sidewalk. The part of your sidewalk is beautification. Landscaping as beautification is not an eligible item. So you would keep the landscaping as a separate cost, right? And whatever you're including here in the cost estimate, you want to back check to make sure that it aligns with what you're stating in your project funding section. All right. So I'm going to move into GAP, and I think we should take a pause here and see if there's any questions on the application.
So you might, I wanted to jump in and give a recommendation.
Sure.
With regard to the application. The application is interactive. And you really want to get your information in the application. It expands, those blue boxes will expand so you get that information. So when we're requesting a scope, please don't write see attached. If you have an expanded scope, you have additional information, go ahead and place that as an attachment. But for the most part, let's capture the information in the application. Some people will not want to go to another section to go search through additional documentation when they can have it right there. So, it makes it easier for the reviewer to be able to analyze the application and, have a better determination. And also the other recommendation is the attachments are not in lieu of a response in the application. Make sure you have your information completed in the application, and then the additional attachments will be required. Make sure you're aware that you have to upload everything, and I know she's going to go into that. If not, the system won't let you. And I just wanted to give that recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that, Anita.
I think I see Renee Wilson with her hand up.
Go ahead, Renee.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Samara. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. I just wanted to confirm, you mentioned on the project funding to detail also when we are requesting the funding. So my question is, when will funds be available? You mentioned 2024. Is that quick of a turnaround?
So 2024, we would not program anything in
Right,
the first, that would be our new first year. So if your intent is to request funds between 25 and 29, the main intent with any new application cycle is that new 5th year. So 2029 is what we're looking to program projects in.
that's
But we do have funds in earlier years, and we look at when we're closer to, the request, what was ranked and what funds we have, we check what funds we have available at that time.
Mhm.
And depending on the projects that were proposed, depending on the funding that we do have available at the time of project recommendations,
Uh-huh.
is we start looking at whether or not we can do projects in an earlier year or not. So, we don't get our allocations until later, and things are always a little subject to change.
right.
So we don't have the project funding per year right now, but you can always make your ask, and if it's available in an earlier year, we can work with you if, the project ranks high enough and it's shown in the application readiness to be done in an earlier year, right? And when I'm talking about readiness, I want to point out that it's not just that the project itself is ready. right? Because it's not just getting all the design deliverables to us, it's also lab certification. And so if you're a lab certified agency, then, that's one hurdle that we don't have to necessarily consider or worry about, think of, but the certification process for anyone that has not been recently certified, because it was updated and I want to say like 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit more than that, 5 or 6 years ago. But there were people that were certified during the times of ARA, and that certification process was revamped. We had worked with Federal Highway Central Office to make changes to the certification process. So, depending on the size of the agency and the duration that it takes for trainings and to complete certain paperwork, I would set aside six months to a year for certification process, right?
Certification. Okay, so for purposes of the grant for the project funding, we would anticipate the funds availability in 2029, correct?
Right,
Unless we move it sooner. Perfect.
correct. But if you have a project that you feel could be done earlier, you can always list it, and there's a section in the application that says, where are you requesting the funds? And you can state all the years where the funding would be available. So that if funds are available in an earlier year, we can consider that project for funding in an earlier year.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Other questions?
Yeah, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay.
So let me ask questions in regards of the general criteria selection. So I know we have mentioned about what the package needs to have inside, right? So hearing you talking about that lab certification, can an applicant submit their application without being lab
Yes, you can submit an application if you're not lab certified.
certified?
If you're not lab certified and we don't receive any additional documentation from you as to, so we want to see that you've gone through the certification chapter in the manual, or at least have spoken with somebody in the department in the local programs office, and develop some kind of plan to be certified, that you know all of the elements that go into being certified, and submit some kind of a plan as to your path to certification as part of the application package. That's how, as a not certified lab entity, you receive points under that section. Otherwise, you wouldn't get points for that section. But you can submit an application without being lab certified.
Simona, just something that crossed my mind from when I was at FDOT and some experiences I had in the lab program. I think as a local agency, it may be a little bit difficult of a thing to consider, but Simona pointed out having that full 360-degree perspective of what your project is going to do. It's really important that you consult with the department early on before you start putting a lot of resources into an idea, because sometimes something might be, very well publicly supported in your local municipality. For example, stamped concrete, certain utilities, and if it crosses a DOT roadway, it won't be supported through a maintenance agreement. So it's sometimes really hard to think about maintenance requirements when you haven't even started design, but a conversation with the department can kind of recalibrate you and put you on the right path and avoid some fatal flaws that you would have ended up having to lose some resources, going that direction. So always talk to DOT early on when you're kind of brainstorming.
And Renee, I think I saw your hand up still. Was that a remainder from earlier, or do you have a new question?
I apologize. I'm done.
No worries, just want to make sure you covered.
And so maybe you wanna, I know there's a lot of agencies on here that are already lab certified, but the purpose of lab certification basically is, for them to become familiar with what exactly is involved with all the federal and state requirements. So it's kind of it is a lengthy process if you've never done it before. So she's mentioning that you should coordinate that into your time, understanding that that's going to be part of developing your project as well, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to make sure, and that's what I was saying earlier, if it's an entity that has not been lab certified yet, or certification is maybe project specific, you need to be considering, the duration of the certification, right? Because we cannot authorize a project unless the entity is lab certified. So that's all part of your schedule. All right, not seeing any other hands up, right? All right, so we'll go into GAP, and I mentioned earlier gap support, you might want to write down that, well, they'll have copies of the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, we'll actually post this presentation recording to our website, so you can look for it in the next week or so. And we can email out this PowerPoint as well.
Perfect. So just so you know, the webinar link that you have there, if you click on that, that should give you the training on gap in case there's some question that you have and you just want to see how to use gap. So but that's their phone number and their email, and they're pretty responsive. Next slide. So this slide again, this is part of the letter attachments that were provided when we did the launch of the cycle, and it has information on how to request access, how to submit an application, and how to use gap. So if you have a copy of the letter with the attachments, you should have a copy of this. It's one of the sections of the gap documents. So next slide. So when you go to gap, when you log on to gap, you're gonna get the screen that's on the left. So the image on the left-hand side, everybody's looking on the app. It's gonna be the main page when you get to gap. So you're gonna go to the request user access section, right where the mouse is pointing to, and that's gonna prompt up the second image that's on the right. This is for people that don't have a gap login. You're gonna go in there, fill out that information, hit submit, and you'll get an email. Until you've physically logged into gap entirely, assume that you don't have gap access, and reach out to the Black Cat support so that you can make sure you get in and get access, right? So this is really just a two-step process. You request the access, you fill in information, hit submit, you should receive an email. If you don't get an email, contact the support. Next slide, please. So when you finally do get in, you're gonna get, and I don't know what tabs you all get on your side. This is my view, but on the top of the tabs, you're gonna see an application. You wanna click on there first. And you're gonna go to new grant opportunities. You gotta select your organization next. If you don't select your organization, you're not gonna be able to apply. When you select your organization, you'll see the applications that are available to you. If you don't see the application there, let us know. You should all be able to see it. Then you're gonna select apply. So that'll bring you to this screen, and you're gonna see where you put in your description. You can download each of the attachments, and I think in the next slide I have all of the attachments. You download all of the attachments. On the left side, you're gonna see a little checkbox. Some are grayed out. Wherever it's gray, those are required uploads. If it's blue, it's an optional upload. When all of those checkboxes or check circles have turned green, you're ready to submit your application, with the exception of the blue one. The blue one, again, is optional. But just keep in mind, if your project or your application requires a right-of-way letter and we don't have it, then we're not gonna consider the application for funding. So without, and this is what Alina was stating earlier, unless you see every single one of the requires upload checkboxes to turn green, you're not gonna get the button in gap that will say submit. So once everything's uploaded, it'll auto-populate a submit button and you'll be able to submit the application.
There's a button, and once you get all of those uploaded, there's gonna be a budget box underneath it. And until you fill that box out, then the submit button will appear.
Yeah, so just make sure that when you're completing this, you're completing every required section. Because that's really what GAP is looking for. It's if it senses that something is incomplete, until it's complete, it won't allow you to hit submit. And so there's a couple of boxes that are prompted, that are prompting information, or requesting information, and all of those sections need to be completed for the submit button to populate. And I see we have a hand, so we can take the question, Josie.
Josie Garcia.
Hi, everyone. This is Josie from University of Miami. As you guys know, we usually submit with the SRTS program eligibility projects. We usually do non-infrastructure related projects. In the past, when choosing that, there's always been a button saying an SRTS application is attached, which is mandatory. I don't see that on there right now. I guess this is a two-part question. The first part is, within GAP, is there anywhere where we can download that SRTS application? And the second part to that question is, where would I upload it?
So the answer to your first question is, at this moment, no, there's nowhere to download the Safe Routes to School application. Uploading, there's a section at the bottom that says submit or additional attachments. I don't think I have it in our screenshots here. But just at the bottom of this application documents, there's a section that would say upload, and then additional attachments, upload and select. So you can upload things even though they're not part of this list. And then just Josie, reach out to us separately, and we'll work with you on the Safe Routes to School.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, any other questions at this time?
So next slide. So just some upcoming, some food for thought, just so that you're all aware. So the first thing is that we're looking at starting this cycle earlier next year. So instead of launching in January, as we've done for the past many years, we're looking at doing this as a November launch, an early November launch with a December deadline, and having presentations in February. None of these dates are set in stone, but it's something for you guys to note and consider. I don't want it to be a surprise come next cycle. So we're tentatively considering these months for launch deadline and presentations. I wanted to make sure that you're all aware of it as our partners in this. The second thing that we're looking at for the next cycle is that we're going to be requiring resolutions to be submitted with the applications. And we do know that for some agencies, it's a longer process than for others. And that's why we're announcing it now and not requiring it now. So that you guys can, as you're considering the applications you're submitting this cycle, start thinking about those that you want to submit next cycle and start working on resolutions for those applications throughout this time.
And just for clarification, that would be your city or county
Correct.
commission resolutions, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we really want to see, this is all because we need to have that, the agency's full commitment to these projects. When these projects are not, when they're not committed and they're not executed on our work program, it creates a problem of stability in our work program. And it also is, a community not receiving a project that they were looking forward to, right? We want to make sure that the public can have faith in the projects that we're presenting to them, and that what's being committed and promised to the public is actually coming to fruition, right? So we've had some instances in the past where we get to the budgeted year and the entity does not have the funds in their budget, and this would resolve that concern.
I'm wondering if we can solicit feedback on this slide to ask if the municipalities or agencies have any feedback to us about the schedule that we're proposing for next year and the resolutions.
I wonder about the dates. Shouldn't that be November of 2023?
You are absolutely right.
Thank you. I was confused.
2023. Yes. I don't know if everyone on the Zoom call heard that, but yeah, November 2023, December 2023, February 2024. Yeah, this is what happens when you put years at the turn of a calendar year. Okay.
So getting a resolution from the commission or the council, depending on at least 30 days before it has to go on the agenda. So we would be getting our results for this cycle midsummer. So we'd have to move pretty quickly to decide whether we want to reapply and get a resolution. It's doable. It's just, it could be tight for some. We can do it normally in about 3 weeks. We're a small municipality, but the county is 60 days.
Even if you were, like, let's say you submitted an application this cycle, right? If it was awarded, you're still gonna need a resolution for that project, right?
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that one excludes, like, I don't think you have to wait until you hear back. If it's a project that your agency is committed to,
Yes.
then, you can start coordinating the resolution because you will need it for the agreement, right?
Yes.
I see Renee has a hand up. Go ahead, Renee.
Thanks. Hi, Simona. Regarding feedback, just, for me, I know that typically the Safe Routes to School application also rolls out, around this time. It's also due in December/January. If y'all could just assist us in keeping that in mind, having deadlines around, the new year and the holiday season is extremely taxing on the municipality to get that done.
And I think the intent is to have the deadline prior to the start of the holidays, the December holidays.
Thank you.
Were you looking at like the first week?
Well,
Like-
we don't have anything official yet. All right, Lakeisha.
Hi, how are you? Also, I was just piggybacking off of what Renee said. That's also when a lot of the commission board might not meet, especially that December. So if we're required to have a resolution and it does not get on that November agenda, then we might not be able to get it until January when they convene again.
So my recommendation on the resolutions is not to wait until November to start obtaining those. I would start on those sooner. I know some entities is faster, it's you can get on an agenda as long as you're a week of the due date of the agenda. Other agencies take longer. I would say plan ahead of for what projects you're going to be submitting, and start working on getting the resolutions out before the November, because you don't want that to be the reason why you're not able to submit an application. But thank you for the feedback, because we will be keeping that in mind as we work through solidifying a schedule for the next cycle.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
The last slide is questions.
Oh, well, there we go.
So any outstanding questions that we have not answered, either in the beginning half or in the second half, let us know now. Also, for the folks in the room, if you want to talk to any of us separately, we'll stay behind once we log off the Zoom call and give you that information.
Yeah, I think Chris Rosenberg with the TPO acknowledged earlier that it's good to, kind of talk about these projects as soon as possible. And that's why we wanted to have the hybrid set up so that, you can have those questions in person, engage us on what your thoughts are for your projects, and stay online. We have the Zoom room until noon. So, we still have some time in case you want to hang out and ask questions about projects that you're thinking about applying.
Well, I actually think we should probably mute the call, and if someone has a question, we'll just periodically go look back and check, so that if anyone in the room wants to meet with us separately, we can give them the ability to do that.
Yeah, we can do that. And we have our contact information on the screen. If you need assistance with any questions, the projects, you can contact me directly as I help facilitate the process for this cycle. And then we have Janine from Monroe County, and of course, Xiomara, who's here with us. Or Alina. So you can contact us directly. This is our information online. And thank you all who participated today, who joined us for this presentation. If you don't have a question right now and you want to email us, call us, our information is right there on the screen. Feel free to contact us, and we'll be able to assist you or answer any comments or questions you may have. Don't forget about the deadlines. And as Xiomara said, she doesn't budge. So it's a dead end February 20th for these applications. And we're looking forward to have you guys present your projects and so we can start up the cycle. So we'll stay on mute for now.
I wanted to say one thing. So it's the 20th of February and it's 5 PM. The system will not allow you to put anything else after that. The other thing is you have to retrieve the application from GAP. Don't wait till the last minute. The point of that is that you're getting access to GAP. You get it and you have a holding place. You can leave your application. You can be working with your application, put something up and not submit it yet. You can have it there, sitting there. So you have to change out some attachments or something. You can still do that. But the second you submit, that's it. We have your application. So I don't know if they get a notification though, Sumar. I don't think they get a, yeah, I don't know either, but that's it. Once it's saved, it'll let you know you're saved. But just to be sure, so it's really important to get that user access ahead of time. Retrieve that application, the announcement letters there and the criteria package is there. So all the information is there on the site. I can't emphasize it enough because we don't want you to try to get user access. You'll apply, you may not immediately get a response. It may take up to 24 hours. So you don't want to wait the day of and say, oh, I'm ready to go now and not be able to get in and be able to submit. So it's really important that you understand that. Mhm.
All right, we'll hang out on mute. Please raise your hands if you, oh, Renee, there you go.
Hi, one last thing. Will you be providing a copy of this presentation to everyone who attends?
Yes, so we will email it out to you, to all of our invitation lists, but we'll also post the recording to our website. So you can look for that in the next week or so. But
Thank
we
you.
will email out the presentation. All right, not seeing any other hands out there for now, so I'll mute.
who was it?
Access what?
The speaking, he's having
Oh, he's
issues.
trying to
so
ask
he
you a
was
question?
ask- Yes. I'm gonna go ahead and put you, and put you on speaker in case we can discuss further. Just give me one.
Hi,
moment.
and to everyone out there, we're unmuting so that you can hear any questions that come up.
So this is Delvin Donovan, and he just wanted to make sure when will be the presentation. And so I just told him it's March
March
15th.
15th. We have March 15th and March 16th blocked at the moment. It's all subject to change, but right now that's what we're sticking to. The 16th is a tentative date if we're able to get everything onto the 15th. That's gonna be our preference. But it's scheduled right now as March 15th and March 16th occurrence.
And the early coordination of that, once we realize everybody's gonna be, all the applications are in, and we know who's gonna be presenting, we're gonna reach out to you, and we're gonna make sure there's an agenda and everything, so that'll be all coordinated. And that the other cutoff is that the PowerPoint presentations are required due the 7th of March. If you don't have it, you need to get one. You need to do your PowerPoint presentations. And remember, presentations are to elaborate or provide more insight into your projects. Try to stay away from information that's already captured in the application, but give us the more unique aspect or the more benefits that the application is giving to the community, right? That's kind of a tips, right? Tips and tricks. That's really what we want to see, that you're providing some additional information that may have not been captured in the application.
And we also wanna let everybody know, in case they don't, that the application is actually available already. So go ahead, get your sign-in information, so you can access that. Once the cycle is open, we receive the letter that's announced, the cycle, the beginning of the cycle, you can go to GAP and fill out the application. Alina was saying earlier also privately in the room that even though you're not done fully with the application, you can start up and start saving. And whenever you're done, you're ready to submit, whether before the deadline or by the deadline, and make sure it's before 4:49. You can go ahead and start putting in the information. So the application is available. Go ahead on GAP. If you don't have a signing information yet, go ahead and put your information in so you can have your access.
So other points that came up in the room that are for the benefit of the group is that once you create the application, if you select apply, until you hit submit, the department will not see your application. So just because you've created something, we're not able to see anything that's being created or done in GAP for that application. Until you physically hit the submit button, we won't even know that there was an application to begin with. The other thing that we got a question from Gunnar, and as we were talking about it, I remember we've run into issues with agencies' access to GAP on regular project coordination for agencies that use or have like the Silverlight. What is it? It's a software.
It's like
Like
antivirus.
Yeah, it's something like that. So it'll trigger, it'll block in some cases GAP access. And so I say that to say, start coordinating and start trying to get your GAP access early in case you need to work with your IT to be able to enter into GAP properly, because we have had that come up a couple of times. And we really, really want to make sure that you guys are able to get into GAP, submit your application by the deadline.
So thank you for calling in, Delvin. I don't know if you have any further question. And for those who, if you are having any system issues for sound, you can also call me directly. I'll pick up the phone and answer your questions. I have my information on the invite that I sent for the calendar, so you can call me directly. So I don't know if you have any more questions, Delvin. We're open to hear you.
Yes, no, you answered everything so far. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for calling in.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Any other questions in the room that are for like the general group, or just you guys want to have side conversations, I'm game to whichever. You have me for the next 39 minutes. 30 years.
Is there any change to the format for the certification project sponsor letter? Or do you have a specific format? for it?
There, for the certification section and your certification plan, there's no specific format.
Okay.
My recommendation, so everyone that's not certified would be to open up that chapter 7 of the manual and look through the requirements. And, think about how long it would take you. So for example, there's trainings that need to be done. How much time would you need to dedicate to training your staff that would be part of the group, right? There's a subrecipient compliance assessment tool called the SCAT that talks about Title VI, ADA, and your non-discrimination assurance. The Title VI plan and your ADA transition plan are things that have to either be developed if you don't have one, or be updated, right? Because they have to be current. How long is that going to take you in your process, right? So making sure you're going through that chapter, you're looking at all the things that would be requiring of you, and feel free again to call us and ask questions if you're not familiar with anything, or you need help understanding any particular section. So the idea is that you've thought through, hey, I'm going to need to submit this, that. And, we're not looking for it to be perfect, but we do want you to know what you're committing to, right? Because if you're asking for funds, you're committing to be lab certified. Because without the certification, we can't authorize them.
Yeah, I was referring specifically to this first part right here.
Oh, that's the attachment. That's one of the attachments I was referring to. You can just download that and sign.
Perfect.
That's the last one. Let me see if I have a copy of that. Show me here.
So there's also like approval that, your certification process, there's a time where we have to submit things to the central office. So it's kind of a lengthy process. And you have to have a certain amount of commitment, so you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
If not, you can't do the project, so it's a total requirement. You have to do it. And it's really to ensure that everybody understands the federal and state requirements that are associated with this whole program. And that could, not only for the application, but for, the whole life of the project, that everything is required in it. And obviously, there's two different types of certification, project specific and full certification. After you get some experience, and you can apply for full certification, which lasts for 3 years.
Yeah, Henry Rhodes is already certified.
I think you guys started, I was working, I think, with Mark.
Started, I
Was Mark-
never got to the tail end.
Mark Span,
Spanioli.
yeah, and then there was a lady.
Angela Gaskin.
Yes, yes. You started the process, but I think it's because they had a project and then it moved over. So you also have to have a project in the system, that you are having, but you can't just become lab certified for the sake of being lab certified. You also have to have a project, like in a work program moving forward. Just that.
Yeah. I worked on that a lot when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What was that? A little longer? A minute?
I'm gonna date myself. We still have our horse and buggies like that.
Yeah.
Early-
It's changed since then.
Yeah, all this stuff
That's
was
true.
tremendous. It was kind of a pain back then. And getting agencies to be certified and then getting them to actually spend the money. They would have money for years and they would never spend it. And I was never the enforcement, but the finance people say, if you don't spend it by this time, we're gonna take it. And then they talk to somebody, money would just stay there for years and years.
That's not happening.
Yeah.
No, I know.
We're not doing that.
I know, that's good.
But the interesting thing is the invoicing process seems to be, like you got the project built, you're ready to go with it, like, you got an invoice.
Please bill us.
That
Please
shows,
bill us.
that
Please bill
shows
us.
the financial activity of it, right? So the key there is that you want to show momentum in the project, and the only way they know is by getting, paying out. So invoicing is a big factor too.
So this is. I don't know if you're able to pull it up on that screen, so we can show everyone what that is.
Okay.
It's the project, so it's the project certification form. I don't have a copy to show everyone, but I'll just show my computer in the room. That's that form that he's talking about. It's the project certification. So that's what that is. It's a blurb. So I'll read what it says. So the blurb says, I hereby certify that the proposed project herein described is supported by blank. That's to indicate your agency. And that said entity will provide any required funding match, enter into a maintenance agreement with FDOT, comply with Federal Uniform Relocation Act and acquisition policies. For any right-of-way acquisitions, comply with the local agency program manual during all phases of the project. Soon we're gonna have to change that to local programs manual, because that was a recent change. comply with NEPA process prior to construction. We may involve coordination with State Historic and Preservation Office, the SHPO, prior to construction. And 6, support any other actions necessary to fully implement the proposed project. Further certify the estimated costs are reasonable and understand that, blank agency will bear all expenses in excess of the total cost of the project. Upon notification of project award, I further certify that the aforementioned entity will work with FDOT to ensure the associated contracts are executed in the fiscal year program. Project referrals are highly discouraged and are subject to fund availability. And then, signed by someone with authority in your entity. And then this is separate from the budget letter. The budget letter comes from the budget office. This cycle will be a resolution in the coming cycles.
Are you connected to the Zoom on your computer?
No, that's what I was asking. Yeah. How else, but I mean, I read what the blurb says and it's that's what, when you download it, you're gonna get an attachment that says project sponsorship certification. Will read us what I read and will be basically name, title, signature and dated. Other questions for the benefit of the group?
Do you have an idea of what projects you might be submitting for? With these conversations internally?
I'm sure we got it.
Does anyone in the room want to pull me to the side to talk?
Yes, I do.
All right.
I want to ask just this letter here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that when that letter goes out, then it opens in the gap. Is that right? Or is it already
It,
open?
it launched at the same
That
time.
letter already went out.
Yeah, it's already gone out.
Right. This is January 5th, right?
Correct.
So
At the
when-
date that went out, the
Then
gap
it
system
opened.
opened at the
Okay.
same time, yes.
So is there any way for this to come out earlier so we have more time
Well, earlier than the
to
workshop.
work on the application in the gap?
Yeah, we sent it out, the day after it came out?
So you're referring to earlier, you mean like earlier,
Like so earlier in the year so we can
so the next cycle we're
start
seeing.
using the gap earlier. Than January.
Oh, I see, because he wants to, he's saying to pull down, well, I mean, the information of the statewide application is the same, so you can start working on your application at any
So we
point.
can pull those down from.
I
gap.
mean, yeah, you can take the one that's now, like this cycle, and say, okay, well, because it,
We'll need
it's
to adapt it, it's gonna be a
Right.
for the next year.
the statewide.
Yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee that it's not gonna change.
Well, at least the information is kind of, if you're getting
The
your project
information
together.
is simple,
Yeah.
right? You can start building the document, like you can start choosing the project, thinking through all of the things, because for the most part, the forms themselves have changed, but the content, what we're asking for is the same. It's been the same year to year, sometimes in more depth.
Yeah,
So
not,
you can-
not too worried about the content, but more like getting signatures on things, trying to get those forms downloaded and then having them signed sometimes takes us.
Oh, this, any form that's signed.
The only form that's signed is that sponsorship form, that project sponsorship form.
Right.
Because
So
even the
then-
application doesn't have any other signatures. The budget letter is gonna be a resolution next cycle, so that's something that you can start putting in early on. The project certification letter, let me see if it has anything on there. Yeah, that one has the fiscal year, so it's gonna change. It's gonna change that letter, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But, so, I guess, how long does it take to get signed? Something of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't take that long, but I'm just trying to
Yeah.
think if we want to do it earlier.
Because we're
you know, we'd like
launching,
to get this as soon as we can.
Cause I feel like, because we do it like this, I feel like we could make it like, a fill-in, so that, like, I know we like to name the fiscal year,
well,
but like in the beginning of the application, it allows you, the applicant to fill in the year, right? This is my application for this year, 2023, but I wonder if that should be the same function there.
I just wanna make sure that, because your concern is having the time that you need to route the project sponsorship certification letter. And I guess to me, my concern and my question to you becomes, how much time would you need for that? Because that's really the only letter right now in the document that requires signature to sign the resolution. How long would that typically take? Because we, as it is year to year, account for, and like I said, we're reworking the application and when we're gonna launch, when we're gonna close, and this is, like Francesca was asking earlier, this is feedback that we'll use as we're working through the cycle, right? So the next cycle, we're aiming for a November launch, and every cycle we have usually about 6 weeks between launch and, not more, 6 or 7 weeks between launch and application then, right? And I guess, what is your process for getting that form signed? Is it something that's very lengthy?
It's not super lengthy. I'm just trying to think like how I can push this back further just to.
Because the thing is that we
Start
can't
things earlier.
open, without it formally being announced by our secretary, we can't open the GAP system, right? So that's why they got it together. So the only difference would be in the duration of the application.
I was just curious.
All right, everyone, we are 30 minutes away from the meeting, but I noticed a few people already left the meeting, and I'm pretty sure it's probably satisfactory to them. And for those who are online right now, I don't know if you have any further questions. We will be open right now to take them. If not, we can just close out the meeting, give you the rest of your time. And I know there is somebody that would like to pull Xiomara aside to have a private conversation. So we will allow her to have that time before she leaves. So any last questions before we shut down the Zoom meeting?
Before you shut down too, I just want to make the comment. You know, we make these workshops hybrid to allow you all the opportunity to join in if you have conflicts and aren't able to attend in person. My strongest recommendation in future years, if you have the ability to attend in person, because it does give you the opportunity to ask questions, pull us to the side, have those private one-on-ones if you need them for any reason. And so I just wanted to make sure I put that out there. We enjoy seeing you guys here in person. We very rarely get to see everybody face to face. So, you know, come on out when we have these hybrid things. We like seeing you.
No, definitely. Thank you all for joining. We're gonna close the Zoom portion. Thanks again, and you'll see this presentation on the TPO website in the next week, and we'll email out the presentation slides to you shortly. Thanks, enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.